Okay, so we are go for episode 2, or I'm calling them episodes. Call it part 2 of Goethe's Maxims, and we went through the maxims from elective affinities last time, and now we're going to go through the ones from art and antiquity. I'll open up with C. There was one that stood out for you last time, Kev. Do you remember it?
From Art and Affinity?
No, from elective affinities. Sorry, that we
No,
had
no.
last week.
I'd have to look back on it now.
No, I have it here. I was just gonna test you. You failed.
Okay. Yeah.
Behavior is a mirror in which everyone shows his image. That was our one takeaway, our main takeaway.
Yeah. You like that one? It's like, what were we saying about it?
It was just that, you know, it's true behavior that you show your own inner character to everyone else. So it's sort of like by their actions they shall reveal who they are, sort of thing.
Oh, I do like it. Yeah.
All right. So art and antiquity, and I looked this up. Art and Antiquity was some sort of periodical that Goethe released from late enough in his career, 1816 to 1828. So it's kind of going to be later thoughts, and yeah, he's mainly talking about, I don't know, some sort of publication more central on the Rhine, but it's Goethe talking about art, so I assume he just broadens it out. So yeah, that's kind of going to be the topic. So volume 1, issue 3 is where the first maxim comes from, and the issue is called Naivety and Humor, and it's from 1818. And so I did highlight the first one of these, which is number 58. Art is a serious business, most serious of all when it deals with the noble, sacred subjects. But the artist stands above art and above the subject. Above the former, because he uses it for his purpose, and above the latter, because he treats it in his own personal way.
Yeah.
Are you in agreement with him there?
I wouldn't say I disagree with him. I think it's beyond my my scope. I don't know. I would kind of.
Would you agree art is a serious business?
Sure. Yeah, most serious of all when deals with notable subjects. But the art, well, how can it like notable sacred subjects, right? He's saying the artist is more sacred than the sacred subject.
As in like gospel or something?
Well,
or some sort of religious text.
Yeah, I mean,
but that's quite a romantic vision, though. That art itself is what will elevate people spiritually above all else. It's sort of like an abandonment of Christianity in its own way, and this idea that it would be art that could elevate the soul in a pure form. I know, like, that was certainly a streak. I think even Beethoven, was sympathetic to this.
Yeah.
So I think that's why he says that it's the sacred subjects.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of like the love of the individual or the love of self. Something.
Yeah, it's a bit too self-reflexive.
Yeah.
What
do you make of it? Do you agree with it in any way?
I'm sympathetic to their cause. This like idea that it would be art that could unify people. I can see certainly in the German school this feeling, because really they'd only kind of tapped into currents of Greek thought around art and become wider spread in Germany around 1750s, 60s through Winkelmann. So it's very fresh for them. It's very new. And I think that gives it a lot of energy. And when that's being coupled with the French Revolution and sort of a decay of the ancien regimes in Europe, you can kind of, he probably noticed that a void was appearing, and he just had this belief that art could fill it. So I'm sympathetic to it in its own time. Of course, it has the volume is called Naivety and Humor. and it starts off by saying something's very serious. So there's not much humor there, but there is naivety because it's a little naive maybe in 2020 to have simply that view that like art will suffice to fill the soul with meaning.
Well, particularly with contemporary art.
Well, yes. But is that serious? Like, is what was unveiled on the fourth plaque of Trafalgar Square this year? It was like a cherry and a cream sort of mountain of cream with a drone spinning around it and a fly. Like, that's serious?
What would I search?
Google 2020 Trafalgar Square empty plaque or something.
Yeah,
you should get it. Or Trafalgar Square plaque will probably even get it without the. I don't know who the artist is. It's just they always fill it in the 21st century with these absurd.
Oh, I see it now. Yeah.
Yeah. That's for me is not serious. That's not treating art as serious.
Yeah, well, it's like it's very like it's ironical. Scream would say it was like ironical kitsch. It's like kitsch lathered with sugar on top. You know, like really putting it in your face that it's kitsch. Be ironical about it.
Yeah, so that's why I'd side with Goethe over someone creating that. You know.
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting. The issue is called naivety and humor, and I kind of see naivety in that.
Well, I would say that the whole idea of art, like making the artist the focal point as opposed to say the subject, it kind of unmoors the whole thing, and say that kind of has led to what art has now become in the West. In some ways.
Yeah, so you're thinking of like how names now, certainly in extremely like postmodern art, the name is all that matters. As long as it's a big name, he can do anything with his art, and people will pretend it's this, this.
Yeah,
So
it's kind of like
I don't know, like a Raphael's School of Athens. Like no matter what it actually looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So well, that's like Goethe is of course have a lot of influence on Carlyle. So I wonder if it's like this idea that the artist is above his art is sort of leaning towards great man theory. But as you say, it's in a degenerative form now. I've got 60. What is naive being natural is cognate to reality. Reality devoid of any moral aspect is what we term common.
What does naive being natural? Devoid of any moral aspect. I would kind of agree with the sentiments of that. Like there is like a kind of vulgarness to a lot of everyday goings on.
Yeah, I think sometimes if you're in like a solitude sort of walk or something, you're in your own mind, and you're able to cast your mind away from the mundane, the everyday. I don't know where other people's minds go particularly. It's quite an internal process, but you can elevate yourself away from reality in its own sense.
Yeah, it's more like how people connect with each other, and often you find that you end up connecting on a very superficial level. Whereas, like even in the commonplace, if you're alone, you could find something interesting, right? But it can't always be found in pairs or with multiple people.
It casts me back to Maxims 6. No one would talk much in company if he realized how often he himself misunderstands others. That's the sort of when people are talking to each other that it stays at this mundane level, because always someone's kind of overshooting what the other person's trying to get at.
It's like
Carry on.
the class clown kind of reduces everyone to his level.
That's scaling it even higher up. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Maybe a little. The first sentence for me is a bit more just a muddle of definitions. I'm not sure I entirely agree with. I think it was the second one that made me highlight it. Reality devoid of any moral aspect is what we term common.
Yeah.
The next one I've highlighted is Volume 2, Issue 3, Matters of Serious Moment, 1820, and it's number 68. So it's a big long one. I'll give it a go here. Heaven knows why I highlighted it. Let's find out. But the strangest error is that relating to ourselves and to our potential, so that we devote our efforts to a worthy task, an honorable enterprise, which is beyond our scope, reaching out for a goal we can never attain. Everyone feels the resulting Tantalus Sisyphus torment. The more bitterly, the more upright has been his intention. And yet, very often, when we see ourselves forever separated from what we had intended to achieve, we have already on our way found something else worth desiring, something comforting or conforming to our nature, with which we were, in fact, born to rest content.
Yeah, I have to read that again.
Yeah. So basically, our goals will always be sort of like a Tantalus trying to reach for the apple in the Greek, from the Greek myths. It's always out of reach, or Sisyphus who's always pushing up the rock. It's always going to be something that doesn't really have a concrete, obtainable goal.
Yeah.
We might have a goal in our mind, but we will never reach it. But we discover ourselves on the way and find and reach other points that we become content with. So I suppose he's kind of saying we set off on these paths, but what we fall upon other ones really that we find contentment with. What we actually set out to do is
you can never achieve
almost
your
unachievable. Ideal. It's an unachievable ideal. Yeah. It reminds me of other ones that was done through Otley's diaries in the first episode. So I think it's consistent with that.
It's also quite, you've heard it before in more popular terms, right? It's the journeyman. It's not the goal. It's the journey.
I don't think it. I think the person who says it's the journeyman has figured out half of it of what Goethe is saying here. That there's these Tantalus things. Well, no, actually, I'm not even sure the person who says it's the journeyman would have goals. Like Tantalus is at least trying to reach the apple.
Yeah, it's kind of a balancing act. You have to try and improve yourself by like having your ideals and trying to attain them.
Yeah, I don't think it's saying live for the moment. Like that's not what it's saying.
Right.
Or do you think that's what it is saying?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
But I think when people say it's the journeyman, they're usually saying it retrospectively after having had a goal. So I think it does work in the same way. It's the same sort of basic idea.
I definitely like. It's always good in a plot. I think when a sort of adventure plot of a type, when the character sets out to do something and then this sidetrack comes in, it's usually quite engaging that way to do a sort of plot analysis on fiction or something. I always like it when the stated goal is not just where the plot goes, but him setting out to achieve the stated goal is what it just sets everything in motion. I kind of always like that device. Next is from Volume 3, Issue 1, Own and Adopted Ideas in His Proverbial Formulation, 1821. And it's number 73. They whip up cuds, hoping it might turn into cream.
They whip up curds, hoping it might.
Oh, curds. Apologies. Yeah. Makes more sense.
Yeah. Who are they?
I don't know. It's kind of like all the glitters is not gold, except the person's a bit more active involved.
Yeah. No, I like. No, I'm just looking above it. Number 71.
Mm-hmm.
Work makes the journeyman.
No, work makes the journeyman. One word, not the journey, man. as
No,
you were referring to earlier.
journeyman, like work makes.
Journeyman.
No. I was saying the journeyman, like the master.
Yes. Work makes the journeyman. I think Carlyle would have agreed with that a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot in his, it's like the Calvinist work ethic as well.
Yeah. I'm surprised you didn't highlight it.
Are you disappointed in me for not highlighting it?
You just take it for granted.
Work makes the journeyman. Yeah. The whip up curds hoping it might turn into cream is that's something, yeah. I think I just liked it when it's just another way of sort of saying lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, sort of thing. There's still this innate ability or inability in people, and they'll find their own. To tie it back with 68, they'll find their own like place where they rest content, and sometimes it won't be where the mentor expects it to be.
Yeah, you can't really. It's kind of like you can't really save a rotten thing.
Yeah, the core is rotten. Do you have anything else to say, either on work makes the journeyman or?
No. I agree with work makes the journeyman, and I agree with both. I like both.
What would sloth make?
It would make the reprobate.
The reprobate. Yeah, I like that. 71A. Next one I've got is 78. Wisdom is to be found only in truth.
Yeah, I mean that would be a good rebuttal for some people.
I think it taps into this idea of the two truths. Like there's scientific truth, but then there's this other truth, right? There's the truth of the world and how individuals experience the world.
Kind of a moral truth and an aesthetic truth.
Yeah. And I think it taps into that one. So I'm not sure I always entirely agree with it, but yeah, I did like the way it sounds, and yeah.
Yeah, well, he would have a much broader understanding of what he means by truth. Isn't what say a Richard Dawkins would think.
No. So. And I think that's why I liked it.
Yeah.
Because like you can't quantify wisdom, and I think respecting your elders sort of thing is what it lends into, and if we don't accept that there's a truth in wisdom, then it kind of can eat away at respect for your elders or respect for the elder generation.
Like that which is it from Aeschylus or whatever? Man must suffer to be wise.
Well, that's also work makes a journeyman, right?
Lends itself to human experience leads to our suffering leads to understanding of yourself and of reality.
Yeah. Aeschylus. Do you know what that's from? Which Aeschylus it's from?
I'd have to look it up. I think it's Aeschylus.
Can you recite it for me in the ancient Greek, please?
I'm gonna type it and see.
Yeah, you do that. I'll just read it the next one while you're at that. 82. The smallest hair casts its shadow. I suppose I just liked the smallest hair casts its shadow because it can help people when they feel like they're adrift in a massive ocean of life, particularly in a world where there's 8 billion people, and you're trying to find your own meaning. So I just thought it was a nice one there.
What number is that? Oh, that's 82. Smallest.
82, yeah.
Well, and also the idea is that the shadow is like can be a lot larger than the hair.
Yeah, that was to bring the level down a bit. Was something in like Game of Thrones. I remember where the smallest man can cast large shadow. They were talking about Tyrion Lannister.
Right.
But it was a good line. I think it was from earlier
It's
Game of
good, right?
Thrones before it
I like
completely
that.
went off the deep end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also for to be wise. It's being attributed here to Cicero, but I'm pretty sure it's in the like Aristeia or something.
Yes, there's probably a variant of it. And Cicero's definitely. I mean, if it's in Cicero, he's probably picking it from Greek ideals anyway, right?
Right.
It's good though. I've got 85. A last violent cloud of dust whirls round once before a thunderstorm, soon to be stilled for a long time.
What do you think he's getting at there?
I think it's kind of akin to when you've got the beast cornered, sort of thing. It can
Yeah.
do its final reaction in a very violent manner,
Yeah.
even though you're near the end game. Yeah. What tell you a good example reminds me of is the First World War, where a lot of the deaths and a lot of the suffering occur in the sort of final summer. First of all, the spring offensive by the Germans, and then the British and French counteroffensives in the summer of 1918. A lot of the deaths happen right up to the armistice in that final year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that reminds me of there was like like an American battalion or something. Like they're coming in, they hadn't experienced yet, and everyone knew that the war will be over in an hour or something. And most like the Brits and the French and I believe the Germans on their side were kind of standing down, and this American group, like so eager to fight, went and fought and died just for like were sent out just for that for the sake
Yeah,
of it.
I remember. Yeah, I've heard of that from the American troops as well. Were so green or so they were unhaunted, like the British troops were. I think they slowly did learn, but ones you're talking about must have been like still fresh ones, newly landed, because there was new Americans landing fresh all the time, right up until the armistice. And yeah, it goes back to wisdom, to be found only in truth. They hadn't learned that truth, the truth of
Yeah,
what that war was yet. 88. Outstanding people are therefore in a worse case than others. As we don't compare ourselves with them, we try to catch them out.
yeah,
I think of like probably like 90s, early 2000s prime tabloid, when they were just trying to
terrible.
always bring someone down for views and so on.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think we do hold like our heroes or whatever to a higher standard than we hold ourselves, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Or
but I
it's
think
like
it's important that we do that, even though it can be a bit hard on them. It's like it's the extra responsibility of being a hero, or like you have to step up to the plate.
right.
Or do you think it's too harsh on them?
Um, well, no, I wouldn't say. I would say it kind of on a case by case basis. I mean, it's important to have high standards, even if people can't necessarily reach those standards. But the fact that you maintain them kind of keeps things orderly or keeps things.
And would you ever fall into the situation where, if you were like an advisor or something, that you cover up something to maintain the public lie? I mean, a recent popular version of this was in those Dark Knight movies, where they create the lie that Harvey Dent was like a good person. It's at the beginning of the third one.
Yeah, I remember.
They like maintain this peace because they create this lie
Well, that would
and
kind
create
of
Harvey Dent as the hero.
yeah, I guess kind of goes back to that quote earlier. Wisdom is only to be found in truth. Like if you live in that lie, you're kind of poisoning the well, or like there is a price to be paid for that.
Yeah, I thought that was a good device to kind of begin to unravel that third movie. I mean, it has its own flaws, but that in and of itself is a decent like device to set this idea that you've achieved something, but it's quite delicate and it can get unraveled, and it's unraveling around this idol.
Yeah.
I've got 89. It's not important in this world to know what people are like, but to be cleverer at any given moment than the person confronting us. Witness all fairs and quacks.
I like that. It's kind of humorous, but it's like in chess. You need the best move isn't technically the best move. It's the move that outwits the move your opponent is trying to make. Do you understand?
Yeah, so like there's a lot in chess which is well, that kind of jars with. I get what you're saying. There's a lot in chess, but like, it reminded me that there's a lot in chess, which is kind of like a dance almost.
Yeah.
You're
It's like
interplaying
a
with
game
your
of
opponent,
it's like a game of poker or whatever.
but that surprises me. Then with just I remember being in university and some of the characters are very good at chess. Would they'd also be quite good at like mathematics and stuff usually. But you think then they'd be good at something more isolated, but they could actually exploit the opponent quite well. It was kind of like a social aspect of them that could manifest itself.
Yeah, it's kind of it's seeing it's kind of reading the pattern your opponent will try and make, and then
I suppose that's the problem solving element that appealed then.
yeah. Good quote though.
Yeah, I like that. Like, it's another way of thinking of it is like you can be quite successful being a one-eyed man in the land of the blind.
Yeah,
One doesn't find frogs. I'm just moving on to 90. One doesn't find frogs wherever there is water, but there is water where you hear frogs.
yeah. It's kind of like it's just like a logical thing. Um,
Yeah, it's a good one to use, I think, for some people, maybe sometimes.
yeah.
I remember in football, it was like when when Eric Cantona had got that big ban, he's like the reason the seagulls are following the trawler or something. He did some ridiculous. He tried to make, a maxim of his own. It's like if the seagull's following the trawler, he thinks that he can find some fish or something like this. Kind of reminds me of that way. It's like frogs and water, but yeah, it's kind of like
It's like the Socrates, like all men are mortals. Socrates was a man, therefore Socrates was mortal.
yes, it's a classic thing like that would fit right into a Platonic dialogue. Actually, now that I think about it, that's yeah. I've been reading some Plato today as well, so maybe that's why it's my mind. 91. Anyone who doesn't know foreign languages knows nothing of his own.
That's a great quote. I mean, because if you're like a monoglot or whatever, if you only have your own language, you don't have a reference point of how uh,
Yeah,
you kind of take the words at face value, and you don't see like the behind the words is a kind of an idea.
it's you can't. I can't say what type of building or structure is in a building without seeing other buildings, sort of thing as well. Or I can't. It's kind of like Plato's cave as well, and that it kind of isn't, but it's kind of like it in that like you need to clearly know where the boundary is. If you only know one language, you don't know, you haven't exited the boundary of what you're inside. So yeah, you're stuck inside. You're seeing everything through the lens of
that's
being inside
that's
something.
exactly right.
Yeah, and I assume you'd be quite lamentable about like how poorly extra languages are taught in English speaking countries.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, like I'm not a great fan of the education system. But...
No. But like, yeah, I think even actually having I used to think it was really bad because everyone else knew English so well, right? And that was terribly self-centered on English-speaking countries that they failed to have another language learning so well. But actually, it's having gone to particularly Scandinavian countries, it's a bit more worrying than that. They're actually only learning English almost as like a wave of foreign culture inculcating their everyday lives. Like young teenagers on the streets of Stockholm would just burst into paragraphs of English over a conversation with each other. It's almost like Swedish was dying. I remember just experiencing that. It was really weird. And suddenly it felt like they weren't just learning the new language in the sense that Goethe is getting at here, but actually it was something that was just washing over them, this monoculture.
Yeah, well, it's like it's kind of because of technological progress, like the internet and everything, that they're just exposed to a much larger degree than their parents were to interacting with English culture or English language culture, popular culture. Yeah.
Next one I've got is 101. Some people keep knocking at the wall with a hammer and imagine they are hitting the nail on the head every time.
Yeah.
Kind of like the curd. You're not going to make the cream.
A little. Yeah.
I don't know if you can think of an example of that. It can be in history or it can be in an everyday life thing.
So it's kind of somebody who's been right once and thinks they're right every time, or
yeah. So yeah, again, you've used a tactic or something that has worked in the past, but it's not necessarily going to work in again.
Somebody who can cook a good bolognese then thinks they're a great cook and can cook any sort of.
Yeah, I think that's kind of there, but there's also this idea of false imitation in it. I think, like, there's nothing there saying that he's always hit the nail on the head before and then continues to think he's doing it. He actually thinks the process of hammering the wall is so. It's like if a child had seen that happen, but hadn't seen the minutiae of the movement. So perhaps another way you could think of it is like you don't even get it anymore because in the arts, there's no standard. Yeah, it's just gone out the window. But there used to be critics who could tell when someone was just doing a real boilerplate. Like you could even create a boilerplate opera in the late 19th century that everyone would know wasn't really doing anything, because what they'd done is they'd copied all the large movements from, a Brahms or a Wagner, or even lesser ones like a Dvorak. But yeah, it was everything doesn't go. You can see it maybe in movies where certain scene by scene stuff that a director will do have all the basic ingredients, but they've lost the soul of it, or so it's kind of like a misinterpretation and imitation.
Yeah.
104, painting and tattooing the body is a return to animality. I died like that one.
Yeah.
Do you have a tattoo? Of course.
I have one tattoo. Yeah. No, yeah.
That's actually stated that multiple times in my life. A sort of maxim of that. That's one I held myself always.
Where's
You get a pass, I think, because your tattoo is an ancient Greek saying.
Yeah, well, I
Just
know
about
what
get away with it.
I know what people.
If it was a Chinese saying, you would not get away with it. So that would be right.
No, I know what people are getting at with it. Like there's there is an aesthetic to having an untattooed body. Like it's kind of purer in a way. And I can see the distaste that some people have for tattoos.
Someone like Goethe, I think, as well. We have to remember he's in that Greek energy. He's thinking there of Greek sculpture, I think, and the Greek ideal of the body is like the perfection of the body in art and sculpture, and it's always very pure. I mean, it's so pure you can't put pupils on the eyes. For instance, it's got a very unique aesthetic, as you say, and I think he's thinking of Greek aesthetic when he's thinking there of this pure body.
Yeah.
Don't know if you have anything else to say. You haven't gotten that bug, like when someone starts getting tattoos, it then can spiral. You know what I mean? You haven't felt that.
No, I mean I would consider getting some more, but I would only like a couple at most, and sometimes I do regret having one. I wonder if I would have preferred not to, but yeah, I mean I do understand that perspective on tattoos. I think it in itself is now kind of a little bit taboo to be anti-tattoo when you consider
Yeah.
in England good like 50. I'm gonna just say off the top of my head, 50% of the adults have tattoos. You know, some huge number of
Yeah,
Brits.
it's crazy.
A lot of, particularly among young people, it's kind of it's a way of individuating yourself by finding making your own identity, um, and I think that's the appeal to young people with tattoos because they don't feel unique or something, or maybe
Yeah, it's a strange one, the sort of feeling of unique or the sense of belonging. Because I would think like what's really absent in a lot of people's young people's world today is the sense of belonging. Hardly a unique take, but you know. So then, if the outlash to that absence is to want to feel more unique, I don't know. We do live in a strange one where people want more belonging, but also people are behaving in quite a herd like manner. Anyway,
yeah.
so maybe it's just the inauthenticity of what they belong to at the moment. I don't know. 105. Writing up history is one way of getting rid of the past.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the victors write the history.
That's what I'm thinking. You're codifying it. You're almost putting it in a lock and safe. I always like that idea. I don't know. I find amusement in the idea of the definitive history of XYZ. Because it's kind of like, well, this is only one. There's always a historian behind the history book.
Yeah,
So it's just like it can be a very good take, but
yeah.
it's hard to know you're reading something
I think
definitive.
it's always good to remember that every work of history has a narrative, and everyone's vision of history is narrative based, and it's kind of ineluctable. You're always going to have your own way of judging history and judging historical figures and judging whole countries and epochs and eras of people. And
Yeah, To tie that in with the next one, 106, what you don't understand, you don't possess. So if you don't understand your own history, you almost don't possess it. And that can be linked to this alienation of the youth that we see today.
Yeah.
Again, it comes back to education. They're not taught to understand the land in which they inhabit, or the processes which led to even the governments or the geopolitics of their age, or even the development of art or anything cultural as well. And we're seeing an attempt grafted on from America mainly onto Europe of trying to fill the void now with sort of slave slave narratives and so on. Not slave, well, slave morality might be in the acceptance of it, but slave narratives, anti-slavery narratives, or
Yeah, I mean, like they have their place in history, but what I'd say is every historical, like it's about, I suppose, history. It's about what you focus on, and if you focus only on one side, one aspect of history, it will be incredibly lopsided. Yeah.
yeah, and I think you saw the Soviet Union when it was entirely would have been class focused. I think in the 40s, everyone had to read the book, Stalin's book, Dialectic Materialism. As
He
a
wrote
kid,
it.
like, yes, well, I don't know how much of it was sort of ghostwritten, but it was his book, yes. Next one I've got is 119, so it's a bit of a jump to it. So, a false doctrine cannot be refuted because it is, of course, based on the conviction that false is true. But one can, may, and indeed must, again and again, stress the opposite truth.
Yeah.
I think I like this because it for someone of this time, like early, it was 1818, 1820, it works a lot for postmodern, or, we live in a post-truth age, as people keep saying. So I think that's why I would have highlighted this one, that you can see Goethe is getting to grips with the idea of post-truth, or certainly multi-dimensional truths, subjective truths, sort of thing, grappling with the ideas of them.
Right. False truth. Yeah. I mean, yeah. It kind of ties back to the whole perspective you have, and what you like. Obviously, there are factual things that happened, like factually, and then there are kind of ways of viewing those events as good or bad, or how they progress, how progress happened, and why it happened. As it's often tied to such facts, but often hard to find a kind of tangible link, or tangible causal link to why some things evolved the way they did.
I think it's a useful one as well for debates, like not even a debate, but even if you're having a discussion with a friend, it's very difficult in this age, with like someone who is a friend or an acquaintance, but who has a completely different politics, or you've grown to realize that you've bifurcated on your political stance maybe in the last 5 years,
Yeah.
and that what you shouldn't try and tell them what they're believing is false, but you should just try and propagate where your own truth is, and see from that propagation what if they pick up on any of it, sort of thing. I think it's a better strategy. It's kind of what he's
Yeah.
getting at here, that you stress the opposite truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got 1, 2, 3. What was discovered long ago is buried again. How hard Tycho tried to show that comets were regular structures, a fact known to Seneca long ago. So I think it's Tycho or Tycho Brahe. He's a Danish. I think he's a contemporary kind of Copernicus. So in that age.
Yeah.
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 Again,
Well,
this would have appealed to the sort of post-Winkelmann Germany, right?
well, part of that's like somewhat false, like in terms of in like science or in like in many spheres, there are things that have been discovered for the very first time. But in terms of, I think that's his. Yeah, I know what you're getting at. That kind of the adoration of antiquity in post Winkelmann Germany is it's kind of like they thought the ancients knew everything.
Yeah, or that like even if there was a new discovery like Tycho Brahe, say it wouldn't take long for them to realize someone else had discovered it before them ages ago.
Yeah,
I think there is a large truth in it, but we need to realize that,
we've
especially
surpassed
from the Industrial Revolution, really, which
yeah,
was only kind of like beginning around the time this was written, does push beyond that. But I think Goethe is maybe right at the end, where his life straddles the point at which the West or Europe kind of caught up with Rome in terms of its development. I think maybe some people put it in the 17th century, 18th century divide. So maybe he's a century later than that. But the effects of the Industrial Revolution are still slowly filtering through society at this time. So he's kind of like the last person who can say this,
I think
perhaps with
it's
conviction.
still true. It's still true on a maybe a philosophical level or a um,
Yes, anything internal
cultural
until
or
neurology comes up with something concrete. But I haven't seen anything like madly revolutionary from it yet. Even the development of psychology, I'm seeing a lot of it as a sort of rephrasing of things people have understood before. I don't know if
yeah.
you have
No,
a similar take on
I
20th century psychology.
I know what you're saying. Yeah, like all those like Freud used all those Greek myths and everything to illustrate, but the kind of the truth he was getting at was was kind of already budding in those stories or in other mythological stories. Uh,
Yeah, you can definitely break through, I think, but maybe it's a problem of narrative. I'm talking about internal discoveries. Um, Again, I await sort of the great neurological discovery of understanding how the brain can
a hard
compartmentalize
problem.
certain memories and things like this. Like
Yeah, I
almost
don't
understanding
believe
the
it.
brain as well as you understand a piece of hardware.
Right, I don't believe it.
You don't think it'll ever happen?
No, the hard problem of consciousness. Um, no, I think if it does happen, it will be because our understanding of say physical reality has changed, as opposed to necessarily our understanding of our cognitive. Like, so I don't think they're just going to kind of solve. So it's like I don't think our brains are like programs, computer programs.
Who is the sort of skeptical Darwinist or something? Berlinski or something like this.
So yeah,
I can't
yeah.
remember his name, but he is like, I'm talking about the real science. It's like
The
physics.
hard side. No,
The hard side. Even calls like chemistry the soft science. It's
yeah,
like,
but even like Chomsky, uh, who's got some good ideas. Like he's a great linguist, but I don't really necessarily like his politics. But he was, I I think he was giving a commencement address in Harvard or MIT or something like that. And he was saying how in the 20s, they were trying to connect their understanding of physics to their understanding of chemistry. And every scientist worth their salt was saying, well, we have to crack this problem with our chemistry, with our understanding of chemistry. What in fact happened was that the fundamental understanding of physics altered and then fit in with the chemistry. So it's not necessarily that it's not necessarily the case that because like okay, physics is the hardest science, the most concrete science, but our understanding of it is still limited. And when we understand it more, things may change as opposed to how we view every phenomenon.
Yeah, I think we're definitely stuck in a sort of local saddle point in terms of our understanding of physics. We haven't really had major breakthroughs, I think, since the 30s. We've had sort of a continuation of 1 to n rather than a 0 to 1 sort of sense of realignment in our understanding of that. So who knows? You never know when those breakthroughs come through. Next one I've got is 135. Our really and truly good deeds are mostly done clam vi et precario, in secret, with great effort and precariously.
135.
Sort of saying the great deed is that which is done quietly.
Yeah. Or
But with great effort.
Yeah, it reminds me of like say Dickinson or Wallace Stevens or loads of quite like great poets. They would have never like so. Wallace Stevens didn't begin to publish until he was like in his 40s or something. He had been writing for a good 20 years by then, and Dickinson's poems weren't discovered until she was dead, I think.
Yeah, and I think in our contemporary age as well, I always find it interesting when someone just entirely new bursts onto the scene, whose life and it completely changes their life until then, but you can see they've always been working around in the background. When you go back and look at their careers, but just that moment of recognition or that moment of bursting onto the scene, I don't know, it can just happen.
There's a counterclaim often made that you should kind of let everyone know your dream, and then the pressure's on you. Kind of, you should have the confidence to.
Yeah, in hindsight, I don't act. That sounds good, but I've tried that in certain avenues of life as well. I don't think it necessarily works.
Yeah.
It depends who. Yeah, you
Who
need to
you are.
tell somebody if you're telling somebody who's going to be really like a taskmaster for you, and make sure you're hitting certain deadlines, then it can work. But just knowing you've told someone, yeah, is not enough.
Yeah. Maybe sometimes it's a relief to tell, and it's like the work is already done. Then.
Yeah, that's the other half of the coin, and I think I've heard people argue it both ways. So maybe it works for some people and not for others. But yeah, you sort of falsely actualize it in your own head when you declare it to someone. But yeah, I've definitely heard of that as a phenomenon.
What
Go on.
what's next?
137. Dirt glitters when the sun happens to shine.
Yeah, I like that. It's a nice little paradox.
It's kind of like stop the clock, right?
Mm.
Yeah, I definitely need to hold that one. I'm gonna do that one. I think that might be my takeaway. What was there was another one? Work makes the journeyman. Is that your one? I didn't even highlight it.
Well,
Or wisdom is to be found only in truth. That could
I
possibly
think
be.
I think you should get a tattoo of dirt glitters when the sun happens to shine.
I think I should get a tattoo of
On your
painting and
body.
tattooing the body as return to animality.
Um,
But yeah, dirt glitters
no, I
when the
think
sun.
the best one there was anyone who doesn't know foreign languages knows nothing of his own. I think that's quite a famous one.
I don't know if the fame comes from Goethe, but yes, it is kind of a decent one. Dirt glitters when the sun happens to shine. I kind of like that.
No, I do like that too.
He's kind of showing his, he wrote the Treaty of Morphology. He's kind of showing his, the thinking of the sun shining on plants and sort of thing and growth in that aspect. But it's like this false glitter. Yeah. So it's kind of like to do the old. You had an analogy earlier there with the class clown brings everyone down sort of thing, but also the opposite, the inversion of that, is a great teacher can make a certain student sometimes seem like they're doing really well or something, but you remove that teacher or you remove the influence, and it's the teacher is the sun and the student is dirt. He's only glittering because the teacher's there.
Yeah. So yeah. Kind of
Go on.
it's kind of the metaphor of like alchemy.
So I've got 4 more until sort of a change between volumes. I think it might be a good point to call it then.
Great.
So we'll go to 145. Hindus in the desert vow never to eat fish. I actually remember highlighting this one. I remember it.
Yeah.
Because 1820s Hinduism would have still been very sort of a mysterious Oriental thing for someone like Goethe, I think.
Yeah, and who was it? Schopenhauer was a big fan of the Hindus.
Yeah, so maybe it would have been writing around this time, right, or just a little bit later in terms of the peak of his renown. But yeah, it would have been known to Goethe. So yeah, it's just kind of like that. Yeah, be wary of someone who's kind of who fits that.
Yeah,
mold.
it's very apt for situation.
I think you see sometimes when we talked about in the last one that sugar is dangerous to animals or something, and then we extrapolated that to humans. The obesity of our age, but I think that you see the upper classes now also being very fit and being very healthy in bodily mind. But I think a lot of it is it's kind of like that. They vow never to get fat when they're already in this they're in the situation where it's already less likely for them to do so.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, if they were living in kind of a different environment from birth, they would probably be just another statistic of.
I don't want to go full. Everything is the environment on it, but yeah, it was just something I thought of.
Yeah.
Next is 148. Opinions tentatively broached are like counters moved forward in a board game. So similar to your chess. They may be defeated, but they have a set in motion, a game that will be won.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thoughts?
It's kind of like it's like a feeling out process. Like are you trying to beat the person into submission with your arguments, or are you trying to? But it's a feeling out process, and you kind of put something. I don't find, maybe I'm just not great at arguing, but I don't find it often works. It's I think people are quite set in their ways, to be honest.
I think the left have done this slowly but surely. You talk about moving the dial or moving the Overton window, right? So that's really the game. And sometimes they can launch yeah, it's certainly a theory. Like they launch these ostentatious opinions at times in which they know it won't even be widely well received, but it was just to sort of move the dial. Because when it lurches back, it's not going to lurch all the way back to the starting points again.
Yeah.
So you set an idea of setting something in motion.
It's like a creeping. Yeah, but I think this quote kind of is more about an overarching, like a cohesive point of view or perspective. I don't think. I think that's a kind of a political tactic or whatever, but I don't think it's necessarily there's a cohesive structure behind it. Or like there's a lot of contradictions.
Yeah, no, yeah, you can definitely poke holes at it. Next one is 152. A person who doesn't rate himself too highly is worth much more than he imagines.
Yeah, it's, humility 101.
Humility 101, Goethe. Come on, we know this. Yeah, I think I just highlighted it because it's
Good.
always nice to have it as a refresher that there's a
Yeah.
truth in
No,
there.
it's something I probably have to remind myself a couple of times a day.
Yeah, though I have seen before where if you're in like a boardroom setting, or not necessarily boardroom, but like a meeting setting, right? That you sometimes do need to say something. Um, you can't let your modesty get so much that you don't say anything, because people just remember. Again, this talks to the idea like people speaking over each other and not getting the full point of what the other person's saying, sort of thing. Sometimes when you come out of those situations, all the people will remember the fact that you spoke, not even necessarily the details of it. And so sometimes if you're too modest, being like, "Oh well, I know what I say here, but is it really going to add much? So I won't say
Yeah,
anything."
well, I would say that internally, somebody may have to remind themselves of,
Yeah,
but maybe externally, it's important to be outgoing.
I say this is probably quite an introvert. Probably he says. 153 then is the final one, right? In art and in learning, as in deeds and action, everything depends on the fact that objects are understood clearly and treated according to their nature.
No,
I think what I liked about that was he's kind of saying in art and in learning, it's very important to have structure. So you need to see things and understand things clearly and then treat them according to their nature. So one, it's an appeal to how things behave naturally, which is much more in tune with my own beliefs, that there's, we need to understand how things naturally are occurring rather than wanting to graft on some more abstract ideas. And then on top from that understanding is where you get your learning, and then also where you get your art. So you can have cohesive schools of art then. It's sort of like a budding or a stemming out from something natural rather than this graft on, this artificial graft on. I don't know if you get something similar to that from there.
yeah, I mean, a kind of kind of golden ratio, or there's in art there's art imitates nature in its beauty, like say like the all the Greek and all the architecture has a kind of golden ratio reflected in the body as well. So like your limbs, your arms are there's a ratio between your forearm and your hand, and then between your palm and your finger, and between your first index and the rest.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on it. Um, More from the artistic perspective. Yeah, I just think it's like when you're trying to put That's like seeing that's like the first step, right? That you're seeing this something that is occurring naturally, and then you're trying to create art from it, and then but then also layer on top of that is when you try and create a school of art or something. That if it all flows from this idea down, so
Yeah,
the institution flows into the individual who's taking it from the natural proportions, sort of thing. That is a solid structure. That is something that is worth then learning about and teaching and learning.
yeah, no.
All right, I think that will do for our second session. And you're gonna take, you're gonna take. What was the one you liked?
Oh, let me see now. It was
The language, right?
Yeah.
Foreign language.
Anyone who doesn't know foreign languages knows nothing of his own.
All right. Yep. And on that note, we'll be doing the entire next episode in German. I jest. All right. Cool. I'm gonna end this.
Okay.
Unless you speak now or hold your peace.
I'll hold my peace.
Okay.